Good morning, and I'd like to start by thanking the Commission for inviting me to be here today. The Sargasso Sea links Europe, the Americas, and North Africa. It sits in the middle of the North Atlantic subtropical gyre, and for the purposes of this talk, the important features of that are the clockwise rotating currents, which keep material and water inside the gyre, and the subtropical convergence, which also concentrates material, and that's the ocean temperature picture here. And it's the line more or less between the yellow and the red bit there. It's the home of the two species of sargassum weed. You will all know this forms mats. The mats tend to form large clumps and accumulate in windrows, frontal systems, and what have you. They're long-lasting. They have distinct communities of animals, including 10 endemic species, some of which you can see here. They act as spawning and nursery areas for a whole load of different species of fish. And of course, the fish predators live underneath them. They act as the home for juvenile turtles, 4 species of which spend their lost years amongst the sargassum mats. And they're even home to some species of seagulls. 2 species actually roost on the mats. It's not all about sargassum. The area itself is on the migration route of lots and lots of different species, many of which are endangered or threatened. And it's these migration routes which enable it to be called the crossroads of the North Atlantic. The European eel spawns in the Sargasso Sea, links Europe and North Africa with the Sargasso Sea. The American eel goes the other way, from the Sargasso Sea to Canada and the USA. Poor beagle sharks come down from Canada to pup in the Sargasso Sea. Humpback whales go the other way, and so on and so forth. And all of this is threatened. It's threatened by a whole variety of things, of which today I'm here to talk about plastic. And you can see some examples of plastic on the right-hand side. Okay. Plastic debris in the ocean makes up something like 80% of all marine litter. It accumulates in the ocean gyres, where the so-called garbage patches cover an area so large they've been called the 7th continent. Waste typically starts off on the beach, that's Bermuda, and of course a lot of it finishes back up on the beach. When it gets into the open ocean, it gets broken down by wave and wind and ultraviolet light into smaller and smaller pieces, and once they get less than 5 millimeters in diameter, they're called microplastic. And a lot of this stays on the surface, and in the Sargasso Sea, a lot of it gets trapped in the sargassum mats. Plastic was first recorded in the Sargasso Sea in 1972, and it's been studied intensively by repeated surveys carried out by the Sea Education Association based at Woods Hole. Lavender Law and her colleagues have shown that the distribution and concentration of surface microplastics taken over a 22-year period, the concentration is an order of magnitude bigger than previously thought, and that the highest concentrations are in the region of the subtropical convergence. And there's an average figure on the right-hand side, and the convergence is more or less where the black line is. There's been a more recent analysis by Erickson et al. From the 5 gyre experiment, and they've estimated that there are something like 250,000 tons of floating plastic in the 5 subtropical gyres of the world ocean, and in the North Atlantic gyre, i.e. the Sargasso Sea, there's about 56,000 tons of the stuff floating around. And you can see the concentration in the gyre by this particle model, which was developed to guide the sampling of a French 7th continent expedition in 2014. And as the model runs, you can see the surface particles, and they will all finish up, or most of them will finish up, in the subtropical convergence, going straight through the middle of the Sargasso Sea. And there it goes. We're just about there. Yep. Okay. Sadly, plastic is now ubiquitous in the oceans. Larger pieces are used as shelter or as aids to dispersal. Turtles, birds, whales, fish ingest it, and you've all seen photographs of turtles, whales, birds, and fish with plastic hanging all over them. This usually kills them. Microplastics are ingested across the size spectrum from plankton to fish, with largely unknown impacts upon the ecosystem. Plastics accumulate harmful chemicals like PCBs, which are released upon ingestion. Toxic plastic additives add further risk. Bioaccumulation of such toxins up the food chain may create problems with the ecosystem. They may well create problems with food safety and public health. Research to understand the impacts of ingesting microplastics is needed. Plastic itself acts as a home for a diverse microbial community called the plastisphere by Zettler and her colleagues, and that's the bottom right picture here. Bacteria in this community eat plastic. Again, the impact of such digestion on the environment is unknown. Does it produce harmless byproducts, or does it introduce further toxins? Who knows? And where's all the plastic going? There's an apparent mismatch between plastic accumulation in the ocean and plastic production. Law's 22-year time series in the Sargasso Sea found considerable interannual variation in plastic concentration, that's the histogram, but no temporal trend, despite the increase in discarded plastic from the USA, which is the dotted line going upwards. Where's the missing plastic? Bacterial degradation might provide some of the answer. Some of it will be on the beaches, some of it will be in shallow water. But an awful lot of it is probably in the deep sea. Recent work on deep sea cores, there's a paper published last year from the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Indian Ocean, might provide the answer. The authors found that microplastics are abundant in every single sample they took at much higher concentrations than in many shallow water sediments and surface ocean samples. These benthic microplastics will likely pose the same questions of environmental impact and risk as those in the open ocean. And this, in turn, may directly impact deep-sea communities. Does this impact the Sargasso Sea? Well, yes, it does. Apart from the abyssal plain, there are unique communities of filter feeders and associated invertebrates and fish found on the chain of seamounts lying underneath the north of the Sargasso Sea, where literally hundreds of undescribed species live. Until 2 months ago, February this year to be exact, nobody really knew what the scale of the problem is. And then Jambeck and her colleagues from the University of Georgia have estimated for the first time the quantity of plastic entering the ocean from waste generated on land. This is a summary picture of their paper, but the numbers are staggering. In 2010, 275 million tons of plastic waste was generated by 192 coastal countries, with between 4.8 and 12.7 million tons of mismanaged waste entering the ocean. Population size and quality of waste management determine which countries contribute most to mismanaged waste entering the ocean. 20 countries were ranked according to the mass of unmanaged waste, and collectively the 23 coastal European countries rank number 18. That means there are 17 countries worse than the European coastal countries. The authors also estimate that mismanaged waste entering the sea will increase by an order of magnitude by 2025 to 155 million tons, but that the peak of global waste will not be reached until 2100. There's an awful lot of plastic. They suggest long-term solutions, most of which, of course, is concerned with not putting it in the ocean in the first place. You can reduce the waste. You can improve waste management. You can use waste as an energy source. You can change the recipe in plastic production. And, of course, you can educate. Stop throwing it away. Stop throwing it in the oceans. The absolute values of these various estimates might be questioned, but there's no doubt that the numbers are all very large, and they indicate the size of the problem. For Europe, the nearest concentration site for plastic waste is the Sargasso Sea. But plastic's not the only threat to the Sargasso Sea, and because of this, in 2010, an organization called the Sargasso Sea Alliance was created to draw international attention to the importance of the Sargasso Sea and to try and work with competent organizations to ensure the conservation of elements of the Sargasso Sea. This was reasonably successful, I think, leading to 2014 to the Hamilton Declaration of the Collaboration of the Conservation of the Sargasso Sea, which has so far been signed by 5 countries, the Azores, Bermuda, Monaco, the United States of America, and the United Kingdom. We are optimistic that further countries will also add their signatures to this. And they created at the same time the Sargasso Sea Commission to carry on the work of the Alliance. The Commission has these aims, which you can read down here. And of course, we have a vision. And this is our vision, a clean, healthy, diverse, and productive Sargasso Sea, which I think resonates pretty well with your Galway statement. Thank you very much.